seat funds? Okay. Last is the budget, which you guys have a big part of, and I've also done a brief little timeline. I believe there's some training that governance council members will go to, and I know that those PowerPoints have already been put together. But basically, first thing, of course, is our funding is completely based on how many students that we are projected to get. And right now, they have it projected at 1562. Based on that number, and this is the conversation, the question that kept coming up, working with the district, the leadership team, the admin team, based on our facility and the limitations that we have, we believe we can comfortably accept 45 students from out of our attendance zone. And I do want to quantify that. Quantify? I want to make sure it's clear. We are not taking any students outside of Fulton County. So some people say out of district. When we hear out of district, we hear out of Fulton County School District. So I want to make sure I make it clear. I'm going to use the phrase attendance zone. So we're taking 45 Fulton County students from outside of our attendance zone. If everybody shows up, that puts us at 1607, and we feel pretty comfortable because that's where we were last year. Logistically, we don't even do the one-way hallway anymore. So we think that we can safely and reasonably accommodate. We don't. We haven't really publicized it. We just don't enforce it anymore. It is. We just don't really enforce it. So tell people.
That news will spread very quickly.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know.
Well named.
Yeah. So basically, the timeline for me is this: we are at the beginning of February going to get our numbers, and you may hear reference in your training to something called Prime. That is the budget software that we use to develop and move money. Last year it was a new system, and I made a lot of mistakes, but I'm going to say I'm not the only one. This year I actually had the opportunity to sit on a committee that improved the software, but you guys don't care about that. February 11th, I need to have basically a rough outline of the budget done, working with the admin team and Ms. Murphy and other folks in the school leadership team. And I present that or meet with Dr. LaCava on February 11th, who you guys know is my boss. February 17th through March 13th, we continue the process of refining our budget. March 14th to March 18th is the approval process for program managers, you guys, and the area superintendent, again, who's Dr. LaCava. And then March 19th through 20th, it's submitted. March 4th, my hope is to have sent to you guys a working draft of the budget, and then you guys tell me which meeting you want to do the presentation. Last year it worked pretty well in the sense that, for those of you here, that I presented a kind of a broad outline of where our dollars come from, where they go, and our plans for spending them. A lot, of course, is done collaboratively in the building. And then by the 13th, the Governance Council has to approve it, and there's actually a certificate that Ms. Poncella and I sign off on. Here's a couple of things that kind of get a little bit lost in the mix. The budget numbers I get in February are going to be solely based on enrollment. As we went through last year, and our veteran members remember this, is as different funds are allotted, become available, the board will also often add things in May and in June, which for us is essential because we use that money to run our block schedule. So the first time when I present the budget, I'm going to say, as we get additional funds, here's the things we're going to add. So, and the timeline is kind of on there. You'll see that last year that didn't happen until June. So everything, if you remember, everything we would have put out about the schedule, we said contingent upon approval of the budget by the board. So the superintendent, the deputy superintendent, they go to the board and say, here's we'd like additional per pupil allocations. We'd like additional funding for parapro positions. We'd like additional funding for administrative positions, whatever the case may be. Normally that is not included in the first round, but that does get added later when the board approves supplementals to the budget. Does that make sense? Okay. So the point is when you see that first, and I had to learn this last year, when you see that first budget number and it's based solely on that enrollment number, don't panic because there are more dollars that are going to come. Our question is, once those new dollars come, how are we going to use them? And you guys are going to get more training from what I understand in PowerPoints and webinars and all the stuff that come with that. Any other questions about anything I've talked about or presented?
45 that are coming in, is that the same criteria? Are we going to use the same criteria? So
Same ones we used last year.
the first one is if you have a sibling currently enrolled at Riverwood, right?
I'll tell you what, Obie's done this presentation 4 times, so I don't want to mess it up. So do you want to talk about the criteria a little bit?
Because I've been asked that question and I messed it up, so I want to.
Right.
There are,
It's on the application.
yeah, there are priorities.
Well, that's what I mean.
Right. If, and that's especially if we end up needing to go to allotment. then we fall back on those priorities. But the first is either you have a sibling here at Riverwood, or and it's the same pool, same priority, or you're a current student at Ridgeview Charter School. So that's to give preference to either, or I guess to really make sure that we're not either splitting up families, or that we're not, kind of beating down the kids and families who really tried to get here by getting to Ridgeview several years ago. But the thing I would say about Ridgeview is, it used to be that kind of once you were at Ridgeview, it was a guaranteed pathway to Riverwood, and that's not the case anymore. And what we've been told is that they are doing as much as they can on their end to contact the families who live outside of their attendance zone to let them know that they have to apply to Riverwood in order to keep coming. But it does give preference to those kids who do apply and who live outside the attendance zone. Outside of that, then it's just everyone else.
So what about employees' children? Did they not get priority?
You want to talk about
You
that?
go ahead, you're going.
Well, it doesn't, the employees' kids don't really fall within the magnet application.
Okay.
They go through the employee hardship process, and so it's kind of all outside of that. And that, it used to be.
Outside of the 45?
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay.
It used to be that employees' kids were specifically included, you're probably remembering, as one of the priorities in there. But a couple of years ago, maybe 2 at least, the district kind of said, we have an entirely separate process for that approval and criteria, so there's no need for that to be counted in the 45.
And I should add that 1562 plans for roughly 20 of those types of hardships. So that's included in this number.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
So 20 is a shot in the dark. Like a lot of this is always a shot in the dark. It's always the best guess.
Well, just so you know, Opie, I do the tours over at Ridgeview, and we do tell everybody who comes in for a tour out of the attendance zone that they're not guaranteed to go to Riverwood
Good.
if they get into Ridgeview.
Good.
It's not a continuous process. Okay. Any other questions?
Yes. I keep bringing this up. What's the AP threshold?
1601.
Okay. So we're going to be
Yep. We took
skirting
that.
it again.
When I met with my boss, we talked about the number, I brought that up, I said we have to make sure that we're protecting our staff and we don't want to overextend our staff or overextend our facility, and that's where we came by the number 45, because if these enrollment projections are correct, then it still protects the AP, which you guys fought so hard to make sure we kept. So that was part of that conversation as well, and staffing.
So if our 1562 goes down, can we increase the 45?
Well, the short answer is yes, but we also have a hard deadline that we're working on, because we don't want to have this as an open process that we're trying to get these kids enrolled, into July and August. So we're not going to really know until 10 days into the semester. That's the official count. So, and that's what we ran into this year is we do our official count 10 days in, and that's the number that all of this is based on. So we'll have a good idea, and what I do, and what I did this year, is kind of get in front of it. If I know that, a week before school starts, hey, we're not close to this, or on the other side of it, we're way over, then I have to start making sure that the people in the district know, so we need the resources we need. The short answer is, it's a best guess, and that's all it always is. Because the original number was higher than this, and then it came down a little bit.
Right.
How many applications do we normally receive?
Over 100.
Okay. So the pool is about 100, and it's about 45.
Right. Now, we still have another deadline right now is January 30th, so, we don't have that many applications in now, but that's not unusual because we still have a lot of time.
You think deadline is January?
30, is that right, okay, January?
So if we get over 100, we look at those 100 and we first say, who has a sibling, who's at Ridgeview, right? I mean, who has a sibling here and who's a student at Ridgeview, those get first priority.
Yeah, well, we actually first look to see if they met the criteria, which I know that sounds silly, but there are a lot of people who apply that actually don't meet it, and they're just hoping that maybe we'll not adhere
Not
to our
notice.
criteria. So we do that first and take out anyone who doesn't meet the criteria, and then we would go to siblings.
And so if there's, out of, let's say all 100 meet the criteria, 40 of them are in the priority. So they get in, and then 5 would be a lottery, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to understand the
No, I got it.
process.
It can be confusing, and, we've been through a lot of changes with this, as we rolled off the old charter and into the district charter, so I get it, and I have to ask a lot of questions as well. So
Okay.
I think that is my presentation. Any other information or questions from me? Okay.
Okay, so I've gotten a bunch of emails and a bunch of phone calls about locker room theft. And it's a problem every year, apparently,
It's a problem everywhere.
everywhere.
Right.
So I talked to the safety committee, and we're talking about maybe coming up with some other ideas than just your traditional, make sure the room's locked, the resource officers checking, because I'm sure, are we doing that?
Well, as much as we can. But the biggest problem, and nobody wants to hear this, is kids need to secure their stuff. I mean, keep in mind that, and I've said this before, we reflect every problem you have in society. Every school does. So and when kids are victims of a crime, I'm quick to tell them, you are a victim. We're going to do everything we can to try and get your stuff back. But there also has to be some responsibility to secure their belongings. And kids will say, well, I wrapped it up in my blanket or in my shirt and I left it on there. Or, oh, I forgot, I just left it for a second. So, and we work with the kids to remind them of that too. And we try to get, all that information out to them. But it is frustrating, and I know parents are frustrated. And I've told you guys I have 3 girls, and when they come home and say this got to happen or that happened, it is very frustrating. But the coaches, as much as possible, they do lock the locker rooms. We've directed which athletes can use which locker rooms. And we also have a process in place for it to get reported. And we've had some success getting stuff back. The sooner it's reported, the sooner we can get it back.
Now, I'm hearing that things are getting stolen from locked lockers.
We don't have any evidence of that. I've asked Officer Renee, and I've heard that, but I don't think, Obie, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Officer Renee.
It's just mostly from people
Most
not
of it.
putting it in a locker.
Not securing it.
Because one idea was like maybe a crime watch section of the newsletter, kind of like after the See Something, Say Something campaign after 9/11, something similar to that, so kids are made more aware. I mean, what do you girls think?
I think that the main problem is just people not looking for stuff. I've never heard of anybody looking into a locked locker. Also, I've never heard of anything being stolen or substantially. A lunch from the locker room. I've heard of phones being stolen from other places, but as far as locker rooms go, we're called over and over looking for stuff. So,
Yeah, it seems like maybe if you're gonna put something on the newsletter, it might be reminders to do this or reminders to do that, maybe instead of like a crime watch or that.
You don't think so? I mean, I know my daughter's phone was stolen at Ridgeview, and it wasn't locked up. And it was the biggest lesson for her, was she will never leave anything unlocked or unsecured. But until it happens to you, you think it's not gonna happen to you.
Well, I want to make sure you guys know we take every one of them seriously. And it gets reported, and there's a form they fill out, and Officer Renee and Officer Parker, do the best they can. A lot of times with the locker rooms, obviously, we can't put cameras in the locker rooms when we want to.
Right.
But, there's kids in and out of there, so it's hard to say, who was in there, who wasn't. And, it's hard, especially the more time that passes. With a lot of our phones, you guys know this, a lot of them have apps where you can locate them. And sometimes we've turned it over to Sandy Springs Police and said it's located at such and such address. So, especially as valuable as these phones are. So we take every one of them seriously, and we hate that it goes on, but, we do that in every school I've ever been at. It goes on, unfortunately.
I agree. As a parent of 2 students, we had 2 iPhones stolen, a pair of Uggs, but it's all personal responsibility. It's the girls not putting their things up, so it's definitely not that.
Yeah, well, I used it as a good time to learn a valuable lesson before it's in college with the term paper on it, computer, okay.
Oh, you want to know about teacher standing?
Yeah.
What is it you want to know? And I will take
Well,
some notes.
Okay, so maybe you can provide this, because transparency to me, the more transparent we are, the less problems we have. So maybe there's been some, I've gotten a couple of emails about similar classes being taught differently,
Sure.
or the same exact class being taught differently. So how do we ensure that the classes, no matter what teacher you get, that the classes are taught the same, or that you're getting the
Right.
same
Well,
information?
I can share with you guys next time we meet, the meetings that we have with our teachers. We were talking about norm and gradings, we talk about, the same syllabi, we talk about course teams, but I also want to be clear that there's no expectation that each class is taught exactly the same. A teacher in a classroom has the professional discretion to say, my kids don't get this, they need another quiz, or this class needs another 2 or 3 assignments, and I know this question has come up, and we've had this conversation, and I go to the teachers and say, what happened? Talk to me through this. And, I'm not in the business of telling teachers how to teach, but we do have to make sure there's some consistency. What we don't want, and again, this is one of those new ideas in education, is it used to be that if you took this teacher, it was an easier A than this teacher, and we want to get away from that. But we also don't want to get to a point where we're telling each teacher, you can only give 4 tests, and you can only give 6 assignments, and on the 4th hour of the 3rd day, you must start a lecture with this. So they do have some professional discretion, but there is an expectation that there is some consistency. And we talk about this when we meet with our course team, so I can maybe talk about that next time if you want to go in more detail.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Is there anything else? I make a motion that we adjourn.
Speaker.
Public comment.
Oh, sorry, public comment. Sorry.
Two different things. On the thefts, I think the big issue that's missing is a consistent policy for the sports. For instance, when cross countries, before they're started, there's no lockers that people can use yet. So when the children are assigned, when any students are assigned lockers, those children then use them. But in a lot of sports, and I'll give you an example, before football, before they have their season, they are not assigned lockers, but yet they're required to be going to the practices and all those kind of things. Right now, you have the lacrosse team. They're not required, but they're supposed to be going to the practices every day, but the lockers are not available because of the locker room size. So those children do everything they can do to put up their stuff and keep it safe, but if you're not assigned a locker yet, where are you supposed to put all your valuables? And that's exactly what happens. They do end up finding places to hide their cell phones and stuff. But my son last week had his $200 cowboy boots stolen, as long as a brand new shirt stolen from underneath his backpack. So somebody's going through their stuff in their locker while they're out on the field, which that's the part that's wrong, because our facilities are old. We don't have the facilities here in the building to be able to, the lockers to be able to lock with their stuff. Coach Seals obviously locks up all his stuff in the room. And what I would recommend, or I would request, is maybe some consistent policy among the coaches when they're not in season, when they're not yet fully in season and do not have access to lockers. Because again, those children are doing anything to do, but it's the same thing in the girls' locker room. If you don't have the facilities yet to lock your stuff up, what are you going to do? So I would suggest maybe a consistent, because this has been happening for the last 4 years, a consistent policy that when a sport is not in season fully and they have not been issued lockers, have the coaches have them lock their stuff up in their rooms, wherever they can have them consistently locked up, because that is over and over and over and over and over it happens. So that would be the one thing on the theft. And you're right, when they have the lockers, if they don't use them, that's their responsibility. Shame on them. Second thing is it's really more course standards. I don't care if you're taking an IB, AB, AP, magnet online, whatever the course is. If you're in one course and you've got friends that are in a different, same class, it'd be that Maddie, and both of y'all are in the same class, but you've got 2 different teachers. When it comes down to grading time, y'all should both be graded on the same metrics and same everything. What's happened in one of the IBSL American Lit classes is one class was given 34 assignments, the other one was given 24 assignments. Because of the block schedule, one of those classes even had 10% extra time, which ends up being 7 hours. So one class had 30% more assignments than the other one and had 10% less time to accomplish them. Those kind of discrepancies, when y'all are both seniors, both trying to take the exact same class, those discrepancies are so significant, it affects, in that particular class, you can take, where if Maddie was in one class and you were in the other, it could end up where you could end up making a B, Maddie, she could make an A, same class because of the different metrics, and that's exactly what's going on. And I think for any class here at Riverwood, you want to make sure, regardless of any student, that every student would be measured on the same metrics, same equality to learn and be graded the same, regardless of teachers or teacher style. I've just never heard of classes anywhere, and I would hope there aren't any more here at Riverwood that are like that, that you could end up with different grades and be graded different when you're taking the exact same course. Love teachers to have different teaching styles. That's always awesome. If they need remediation, and then maybe you have one more assignment than she does, but it's because you had remediation and you needed the help. But that's not the situation in this case. And again, I hope that's my only class here, but I would hope as the governance that y'all would make a stand on this and say, going forward, there should not be classes with significant differentiation for the same course, same class. I don't, again, it shouldn't matter about the teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I make a motion we adjourn. Oh, go ahead. That's a good question. It's close, because we had to move this one back. I think it's February 10th, isn't it? Or no? Yes, February 10th at 7. Because we had, this was supposed to be at 4, but we moved it to 7 to accommodate Patrick Burke. And then, so February will be 7 a.m., then March will be 4.
What's that March date?
March should be February 10th. I mean, March 10th at 4. And then April, I think it's the 14th. It's usually the second Tuesday.
Can I make a request in February that we come up with a date? I mean, I think that March meeting is a little too late to do budget stuff. Do you want to do it as a separate meeting, or how do you guys want to do it?
Well, we have a budget committee, which is you,
And you remember that, that's what we did last year. I just
Clancy,
wanted-
Perez, and
Yeah,
Nissen.
I presented to the budget committee first, that's what I did last year.
So you could do just with the committee.
That's what we did last year, and then I did a presentation to the whole group. That's what we did last year. Okay, so what I need to do is get with the budget committee then, set up that
I'll
first.
send you
That sounds wonderful.
And
Thank you.
Dr. Shaw, since I'll be leaving at the end of February.
Where you
I
going?
don't know if you'll have to find a replacement so that when it's time to go, then
Oh,
I don't know how.
well, that's a Corinne question, or an interesting question. Yeah. Thanks, Marcia.
February 10th, and then
at 7, then March 10th, 4. And then April 14th at 7, and then May, something, second Tuesday, whatever, I think they, May 12th
May 12th
at 4.
That was my New Year's resolution.
Really?
Put things
Okay.
down. Put things
Anything
down
else
if you-
before I try to adjourn the meeting for the?